How many times has someone told you, hey, that thing you made is so cute, you should sell them on Etsy? While making stuff is typically the fun part, figuring out taxes and managing the books is a whole different skill set. Joining me in this live episode is Not Your Dad's CPA Mark II, and he's here to talk about business basics and take your questions. And welcome everyone. Really excited to be here because we have a special guest in-house. It is Mark II with Not Your Dad's CPA. Welcome, Mark.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
And since we last talked, Mark joined us a little while ago to talk about the IRS's new $600 threshold for online payment processors. Mark has gotten a different setup here. It kind of looks like you're in like a doomsday bunker or something. Where are you coming from?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. I mean, it's a room we have underneath our driveway. It's like a suspended slab room. No, not a driveway, under our.
I was going to say, that's pretty nuts, under your driveway. Wow.
No, under our garage. And it's just been sitting here empty. And we're like, why don't I make my office in there? It's really big. It's got a ton of room. And I'm going to make it really cool. It's not there yet, but I'm going to go for like this industrial feel.
Well, I see you still have the boxes in the back of you. So you still have all your boxes. And we're going to talk a little bit about business basics in this live episode. So bring your questions and we'll be answering them towards the end. So, save them, leave them here. And we are going to be answering any questions you have about taxes or bookkeeping. So we're going to go through some basics first. And then towards the end of this live stream, we will be taking your questions. So first, Mark, in case people are not familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background with accounting and bookkeeping.
Yeah, so I've worked in public accounting and corporate finance, but along the way, I started doing taxes on the side, kind of as an experiment to see if I liked it, and eventually went full time and have sort of, I specialize now in helping online businesses and different resellers with their taxes and their accounting. So, that's basically what I do right now full time. People who sell on eBay, Amazon, Etsy, Poshmark, or different types of online businesses as well.
And this is such a needed thing because so many people, especially during the pandemic, started some type of online venture and grew it throughout 2020, 2021, and now we're in 2022. So a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon and realizing, hey, there's some money to be made online. But the tax man, you gotta always be cautious about that. So first, let's chat a little bit about just for anyone considering making and selling handmade items. That's very popular in the crafting space. Where do you even start in terms of just the basic bookkeeping?
The first place you want to start is just by getting a separate bank account, because even if you don't do any bookkeeping at all, you can always go back to that bank account and at a minimum export those transactions, and it's not all mixed in with your personal stuff. So then you can just kind of go through and label everything like this was supplies, this was software, this was, a contractor expense, whatever, and you can total up that way. So at a minimum, get that separate bank account. And then if you want to be a little more official than that, then you can layer on some type of bookkeeping system, but that's where I would start.
And that's a good thing to know because especially starting out, you don't know what you don't know. And what kind of, say someone was to use their personal account for everything, how does that complicate things come tax time?
It's okay, especially if you are a sole proprietor, which is what you are by default. Like even if you don't go out and register a business, the IRS just considers you to be a sole proprietor. And there's no legal distinction between you and your business, so they don't care if you're doing your bookkeeping or not, but they do want you to be able to list your business expenses. So you will have to split those out if your personal and business are mixed. But that can just be a hassle, especially if you have a lot of transactions, a lot of volume. Sitting down and trying to put all that together at the end of the year can be, really overwhelming. And you don't want to do it incorrectly, because if you leave expenses out, then you're paying more than you have to, Or, on the flip side, you don't want to underpay because then, if you get audited, then you can potentially be assessed more taxes. So it's just easier to make it simple on yourself.
That's good to know. And another question I'm seeing a lot is, at what point should you do things like register for a business, get an LLC, that type of thing, register with your government entities? How do you figure out what business structure is right for you when you're starting out?
Yeah, when you're just starting out, typically it's fine to do nothing because, like I just mentioned, you're a sole proprietor by default. That's what the IRS considers you to be, and that is a type of business. And I mean, that's what most businesses are in the United States. I mean, it's over. I think it's close to 75%. So I mean, you're not alone, and there's no problem just continuing to be a sole proprietorship. Usually, especially if you're selling, things on Etsy or whatever, it's not typically a high risk industry, you know. So the next step would typically be an LLC, so a limited liability company, and the main benefit of that is that it gives you some liability protection. And that might be important if you sell things where, maybe somebody could get hurt, or I don't know, if you're at risk to be sued. But yeah, typically there's no urgency to go out and get some kind of license or to register the business. So yeah, I would just take it easy in the beginning and kind of learn as you go.
That's good advice. And it is kind of interesting because it can be hard to figure out whether you're a hobby or a business. And do you find that some people may think they're a hobby when they're actually a business? Because the government does have a pretty big distinction between the two, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, the government basically says you're a business if you are engaged in this activity for profit. If you're trying to make some extra money, they're going to typically consider you to be a business. Um, a hobby. And the myth there is that people will say, well, I'm just a hobby, not a business, so I don't have to do any taxes. But what they don't know is that hobby income is actually taxable. So that's what most people don't realize.
Ooh,
And
okay.
yeah, and hobby expenses, many of them are not deductible. So there's actually huge incentive to
Yeah.
classify or be classified as a business. So, and yeah, I don't know. An example of a hobby, I mean, I don't run into it that often, but sometimes people make money without, really trying. Maybe you enjoy baking cakes and you enjoy entering contests and it's just a hobby. And, if you win first place and get $200, you're just like, okay,
Oh,
cool. I wasn't trying to get that, but so that's still taxable. Um, but anyway, yeah, that's kind of the distinction.
okay. Yeah, that's good to know because I think on the surface you might think classifying yourself as a hobbyist is better, but it seems like there's a lot of benefits to classify as a business because you can take the tax write-offs and whatnot. So yeah, good to know. Okay, so many people starting out, online sellers, cannot afford things like QuickBooks or to hire someone like yourself, a CPA. Are there any low cost or very free resources for bookkeeping?
Yeah, I mean there are options out there. So they have there's a whole range of bookkeeping products. So you have really simple bookkeeping programs all the way up to, more sophisticated, what I call like official double entry bookkeeping programs like QuickBooks. They have free versions of those. So one is called Wave Accounting if you want to do like the more official way. So that's free. And then, I gotta think they have free like simpler versions as well. But I mean, you could start with anything as basic as a spreadsheet. Um, you can get you can get cheaper bookkeeper options. Like if you want to hire a bookkeeper, I mean, you can go to a contractor website like Upwork.com. You could go to onlinejobs.ph. I mean, that's if you're comfortable with that. Some people aren't comfortable with that, but I mean, there are really capable people or bookkeepers who are, stateside who are just starting out. A lot of times they'll be a lot cheaper. Um, I'd say just don't limit yourself. There's a lot of different possibilities and a lot of economic options as well.
That's good. That's good advice too. If you're not comfortable with numbers at all, do you recommend getting a professional? Like if you don't feel very confident about doing it yourself?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, especially if your business is to a point where, you have some cash flow and it could justify some that additional expense. The tough part is if you are just starting out and don't have any additional income really yet, and you hate numbers, then that's the tough
Yeah.
spot. So in that case, I would probably just bite the bullet and at least try to, get that separate bank account. And I mean, there are a lot of good spreadsheets out there too that you can probably download them for free, and some people sell them for 10, $20, where you can track your business activity manually. Um, yeah, so I would just kind of bite the bullet and learn how to do it. And I mean, it's really only going to be a few minutes a week. And then once you get things going, you can say, okay, I get it now. I want to hire a bookkeeper. Or you might say,
Okay.
you know what, this wasn't that bad. I'll just keep doing it.
Hey, cool. Yeah, and that's interesting because QuickBooks literally just raised the price too. So now it's a
They
little
are
bit
always
more.
raising the
I
price.
know. Do they do that every year? What the heck?
Or more, yeah.
Or more, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about small businesses. You work with a lot of small business owners, like the resellers or people who are selling things online. When you're working with these people, what are some of the common mistakes that you run into that they've made?
Yeah, the biggest mistake I think is just not having good records. I mean, I work with a lot of different beginners every year, and yeah, just not having very good bookkeeping. Um, and then another mistake would just be not remembering uh, quarterly estimated taxes. Now, those aren't
Ooh.
required for everybody. It just depends on how much tax you owe at the end of the year. And those are basically in place of the fact that you don't have an employer anymore who's collecting your taxes throughout the year. So if you're a W-2 employee, your employer is withholding Social Security and Medicare and income tax all throughout the year. But when you're self-employed, you don't have anybody doing that for you. So the government says, well, you have to pay that quarterly. So that's another thing to determine whether or not you are required to do, so you can avoid penalties and interest at the end of the year. Yeah, so those might be the two biggest ones, just bookkeeping and remembering the taxes that you're going to owe at the end of the year.
And one kind of hack you can do if you're doing this online selling as a side hustle, you can have your W-2 employer withhold more, right? To kind of help with that. Is that something you could do in lieu of the quarterly payments, or is that something you would recommend doing in addition to?
No, yeah, you're exactly right. So if you or a spouse, if you file jointly, have a W-2 job where taxes are being withheld, instead of having to make manual quarterly estimated payments because of your side hustle or your Etsy job, you can just have your W-2 employer withhold more, because all that income goes together. It all goes in the same bucket. So it doesn't matter where you pay the taxes from as long as they're being paid.
That is good information. Do you have any like really funny kind of without naming names? Do you have any stories about some extreme situations, like something where someone wasn't doing their books for like 18 years or something? Anything crazy?
Oh man. I mean, I've caught people up 4 and 5 years back. I have had some people email me who hadn't done their taxes in 10 years. Yeah, maybe not too
That's a
crazy, but I
long
mean,
time.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had people email me who, say they literally look out their windows to see if the IRS is coming. They
What?
literally lose sleep. They, actually, throw up. So,
They're that wow. Oh, that is
and
pretty.
yeah, and it's too
That's a little scary.
yeah, and it's too bad because there's a lot of energy being wasted out there in the form of anxiety and stress that really isn't necessary. I mean, once you just learn the basics, it can do a lot for just giving you a lot more peace of mind, less stress, less anxiety. I mean, just some of these basics that we're talking about being familiar with those can make a huge difference in your health.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you've shared some of your correspondence on Instagram, and I'm always like, what in the world is going on with these people? Like, there's some really crazy stuff here. Now, what are some very like small, very basic things that everyone can do just to make sure that you are staying within compliance of all the IRS laws? Oh, and by the way, quick disclaimer, this is in the description box, but this does not constitute legal, financial, or tax advice. Mark is here as a guest just to provide some information. But again, this does not constitute any sort of official advice. Please see a tax professional if you are looking for advice for your specific situation. But yeah, what are some things that people can do just to kind of make sure that you're staying with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think just getting a basic education, even from watching stuff like this, a lot of people don't know what kind of resources are out there. So just, and you don't have to be an expert either. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I mean, a lot of people, so I have a Facebook group where people can ask questions and things, and a lot of times people will respond. Well, in the beginning, people would respond, go ask a CPA, go get a CPA. And I'm like, no, it's okay to ask questions online. There's a lot of good information out there. You just got to make sure you're getting it from a reputable source. And yeah, I mean, I have a couple courses and things to help people just get that basic foundation. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. The first things are, separating your activity, usually by getting a bank account, maybe layering on some bookkeeping software, learning the basics about tax. So the income tax that we talked about, one thing to be aware of is self-employment tax. So if you're just starting out, this is something that comes as a surprise to a lot of people. So it's basically a 15% tax on your profit, and it is in place of the Social Security and Medicare that you would otherwise have withheld from a W-2 paycheck. But yeah, those are the things that I can think of offhand.
Yeah, that comes to as a surprise to many people who are doing their own books and they're self-employed. They don't understand that there's currently, like if you're working a regular job, isn't it true that you're kind of splitting the cost with your employer and you don't ever see the money because it's already being withheld? But when you're having to do it yourself, it feels like you're paying more in taxes than you are, but it was the same as it's always been. That cost was just divided between you and your employer in the more traditional situation, right?
Right. Yeah, because Social Security, Medicare they take out 7.65% of your gross earnings.
Fun times.
Yeah, but then what a lot of people don't know is that your employer is basically matching that from their end. And then when you're self-employed, you get to pay both pieces.
Ooh.
So it's that 7.65 times 2. So it's basically 15% now, which is a chunk. And then you have income tax on top of that. So, it can end up being, 25, 30%. It depends on your income tax rate. And a lot of people are then like, well, doing my own thing doesn't even make sense then. And I'm like, no, it still makes sense. Like you still get to keep that other 70%. I mean, I don't know. It's just one of the things we got to deal with as small business owners.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so the last time we checked in with you, we had talked about the new IRS threshold of $600. So that basically means that a lot of payment platforms like Etsy, Poshmark, I believe like Cash App, all of the major ones before the threshold. So like if you made, $10,000 on Etsy in a year, the Etsy was not required to report that to the IRS unless it reached $20,000, I think, and or 200 transactions, something like that. Now the threshold is much, much lower. So it's $600 total and there's no transaction minimum. So a lot more people are going to be getting these 1099Ks from the IRS due to selling anything online. And a lot of people were very freaked out about that and felt it was pretty unfair. So that was a few months ago, and you had done a video that got a lot of views talking about it. Since we last chatted, what's the general vibe on that now? And have you gotten a lot of folks approaching you with concerns about that now that the dust has settled a bit more?
Yeah, I did initially. There was a lot of hype for a little while.
Yeah.
It has died down. But I can almost guarantee when tax time starts,
Oh no,
it's gonna
there's going to
ramp
be
up.
another wave
Yeah,
there because people are not going to know.
people are gonna freak out just as much,
Yeah.
if not more, as they were
Oh.
when that first came out. So it's yeah, I predict it's the calm before the storm right
Oh.
now. But
So so you're thinking like January, February when they start getting these emailed or in the mail, you think that's when it's gonna the tidal
yeah,
wave's gonna
well, yeah, because
start?
the deadline to send out 1099s
Okay.
is the end of January, so people are going to start getting those late January, early February, um, and people are going to be confused, and they're going to be like, "I thought I didn't have to pay
Yeah.
taxes, but
Oh.
actually yeah,
Yeah, that's gonna be pretty rough for a lot of people, especially if you have not been setting aside money to pay your taxes or you have not been paying these quarterly estimated taxes to the IRS. That's going to be a bit of a jolt for some sellers for sure. And the other thing that has been kind of making the rounds lately, obviously, there's been a lot of news with the IRS with the Inflation Reduction Act. And you did another video, which, by the way, check it out. I will link it down below in the comments about what's going to happen with the IRS funding. So a lot, there, like people are just, I think there's just a lot of fear about this and a lot of kind of sexy headlines, but you kind of broke down what's reality and what's exaggeration. But can you talk about that a little bit? Because people are like 87,000 new IRS agents and thinking that these IRS agents are coming for them. But I think it's a lot more nuanced than some of these headlines are trying to portray.
yeah." There's a whole range of how it's been sensationalized. I mean, some people are like, yeah, 87,000 new agents, they're going to have guns, all the way to people kind of pushing back against that and saying, no, that's not true at all. And they're not going to look at small businesses. They're going after, corporations and stuff. So I think it's going to be kind of in the middle. I mean, yeah, some of the politicians have said and instructed the IRS not to look at anybody who earns less than 400,000. But that's nowhere in the actual bill. And I think just based on the fact with what happened with the 1099 thresholds coming down so low, I mean, $600, who do you think is making that? That's the
Yeah.
small business individual.
Yeah,
Uh,
It's not Jeff Bezos or anything.
yeah, yeah. So
What And another thing you pointed out is that a lot of these, like the starter agents, like the ones that are new, they're not going to be able to handle these complicated tax returns like the ones that corporations do. So handling that level of tax, level of job requires someone with specialization. And I believe it was you that mentioned in the video that the IRS just doesn't have enough agents that do that. And a lot of the ones that do are going to be retiring soon. So a lot of these agents that they're going to be hiring can only handle like the everyday Joe tax return.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if you put yourself in their shoes, they just can't. They have to go after what is feasible, and who's that? That's
That's
us.
us.
The
That's
people with the
us. Oh
simpler,
man.
smaller business returns. And yeah, but the IRS did get $80 billion, most of which is for them to be able to ramp up their enforcement efforts, or in other words, their auditing capabilities. So even though the likelihood of being audited is still very low, maybe it was 1%, if and maybe now it'll be 2%, if it doubles. So it'll still be low, and I'm just throwing out numbers. I'm just making those up, but the likelihood will increase. So it's just a reminder to do what we all already should be doing, of having good records in place. Because if we have that, I mean, and I have to mention this, we really don't have anything to fear if we are doing things correctly. If you get audited, or if somebody gets audited, I'm not nervous at all if the person has, halfway decent records.
Do you have any idea how the IRS tends to flag certain people or businesses for audits? Like what are they looking for?
I mean, they have computers, and when there's something that's really far outside a normal range, it could potentially flag it for a human to look at, and then that could result in an audit. So sometimes it's that. I think sometimes it also is just totally random,
Oh,
but
like jury duty or something or
yeah, maybe. and sometimes people ask me like, oh, I lost money. I'm showing a loss this year. Is that going to cause a flag for the IRS? And that's totally normal. Like, tons of businesses lose money, tons of businesses make money. So that's not a reason for concern. That's not going to flag anything.
Okay. And this year, is there anything, in light of this news, is there anything different that you're telling your clients to do or watch out for?
Um, I mean, yeah, in addition to what I mentioned in that video in accurate record keeping, I mean, one thing that I did send an email out a few months ago to my business clients, and by business clients, I mean my multi-member LLCs or partnerships or S corp. So I'm not talking about sole proprietors. So those are businesses where oftentimes the IRS requires you to include additional information in the tax return. So in addition to your income and expenses, like your profit and loss report, they also want you to include a balance sheet. And what I was finding is that my clients weren't keeping great books, so they didn't have those reports. So I sent an email and I said, I don't know if I'm going to have time to help you put these all together at tax time. So this next year, I'm actually going to require you to have,
Ooh.
your bookkeeping in place so we can pull those reports. Otherwise, I may not be able to help. Just based on, my time, it helps both of us. It's not going to take me a ton of time, and they're going to have their records both for taxes and their own personal benefit. So I basically just told them, to a subset of my clients, I need you to have your books in order because it's going to help all of us.
That's good advice. Wow. Well, this is going to be a pretty interesting upcoming year for sure. That is, yeah, no doubt about that. Okay, so what happens if you, like, say you get these 1099Ks and you don't report them on your tax return? What happens to you?
I mean, yeah, nothing drastic. So you get the 1099K, and the IRS also gets that same information. So if you get a 1099K that shows that you had sales of $10,000, but then the IRS doesn't see that on your tax return, they're going to send you a letter and they're going to say, hey, it looks like this $10,000 was not reported, and you owe us taxes on this amount. That could be $3,000 or something. So and a lot of people will get that letter, they'll freak out. They might actually pay it, but what you should do is actually go back and amend your tax return, because they're not taking into consideration the deductions that you have. So you need to go do your tax return and put that you earned the $10,000 of sales or whatever, but then also include all your expenses. And when you include all those deductions, it might actually yield a taxable profit of a lot less than $10,000. Let's say it was only $2,000. So then you'll owe the tax on that 2,000 instead of the full 10, which is a huge difference. And if you know that, if you get that letter and you're just like, oh, I forgot to report my income and expenses from my business on my tax return, it's actually going to be a lot less than that. You're going to feel a lot better than if you have no idea what's going on. I get a lot of panicked. I mean, that happens all the time. That's the most common panicked email that I get.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like when the IRS is sending you that letter with the amount, your tax implication might be much less than that. You just have to really go back, and that again emphasizes the importance of keeping your books correctly and accurately, so that you can be prepared for those types of situations. So that's good. That is good to know. Okay, so we do need to talk about this because I think this is something that happens a lot with people who do craft fairs or sell things to family and friends, is they're doing it for cash under the table. And I'm sure this is something you run into all the time. But talk about some of the pros and cons of doing this.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how they're doing it. Like
I know officially you can't tell people to do that, but I'm sure you're aware that people are still going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, typically, if let's say you have somebody helping you, either create your craft or list it or whatever, and you might pay them under the table. I mean, basically what they are is a contractor, and if you're paying them cash, I mean that's actually okay. Like if they're a contractor and you're paying them cash, that's fine. You can deduct that. What's not okay is if, well, from the IRS perspective, is if you are specifically doing that so it's not being tracked
Yeah.
anywhere, because
Which, yeah, I
I
think
do.
that's kind of why they're doing it.
Yeah, right. I mean, because once you pay that person, it's still kind of their responsibility to report that income on their taxes. So if they're a contractor, then they would go report that as income. If you pay them over $600 during the year, technically you're supposed to give them a 1099-K. If you're not doing that intentionally, then yeah, that is under the table. And if you are doing it that way, the IRS is not going to know about it. So then they won't issue anybody a 1099, or I guess you won't be issuing the 1099, so they won't know about it. So I
And
guess.
yeah, and on the flip side too, I know quite a few people who sell, say, crafts on Facebook Marketplace or via Instagram, and then they take cash. So there's really no electronic record, and but they're kind of doing it on a smaller scale. So what's the risk in doing that, if anything?
I mean, honestly, it's probably not a huge risk. Yeah. I mean, just think of how many people, I don't know how popular Craigslist is these days, but I mean, so many people buying and selling stuff. Usually it's less than you purchased it for,
Hmm.
which the IRS doesn't really care about that since you're incurring a loss. But um, it's just so common. The risk is so low that anybody's ever going to, you know, find out about it
Yeah.
or target you. If you're dealing with really significant dollar amounts, on the other hand, that might be something that somehow attracts attention somewhere. But you know, I
All
just
right.
try and help people do things legally, in the most tax efficient way.
Okay. But technically, you're saying that's not really legal to do. Is that
Yeah, sure, right.
okay? And without naming names, I do know people who do that. The other thing they have to know is that if you deposit that money in a bank account anywhere, then that kind of creates a record of cash. Is that something that you should also watch out for if someone is hypothetically doing that? Like, say you make $10,000 and then you deposit that in the bank, that might look a little strange, right? And then like, where
Yeah,
did this money
maybe.
come from?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the banking rules, like when they start looking at that, because there's a lot of different things that could be. I mean, that could be a gift from
That
somebody.
sure could be a gift, you know. And do you watch that show Better Call Saul at all, or
I've seen it,
Breaking
yeah.
Bad? Okay, did you see the episode? Or I think this was from Breaking Bad, where Saul Goodman is explaining money laundering to Jesse. That's like probably one of the best things of all time. As an accountant, I know you can't endorse that, but I thought that was a pretty funny. It was a very funny scene. He's trying to tell Jesse. Obviously, these people are selling illegal goods, and he's explaining to this one character why he needs to buy a nail salon for tax purposes and for to keep being able to do his criminal enterprise. But he's trying to explain, like, hey, if you want to be a criminal, you have to buy this nail salon so that you can actually spend this money. But I don't know. It's just a funny scene. Guys,
Yeah,
look it up. It's hilarious.
I'll go
It's
back.
honestly really hilarious because Jesse is involved in criminal activity, and he clearly does not understand money laundering or the tax implications. And as throughout history, the IRS has used tax evasion to get some fairly big criminals, like what was it, Al Capone or something. So sometimes that's the way they get these people, is through the tax man.
Yep.
Right? I don't know. Anyways, just a fun story there. But yeah, Saul Goodman, probably one of the best TV characters of all time, explaining money laundering. Not that we're endorsing that, because that is illegal. Certainly an illegal activity, so don't do it, guys. But look up the video of Saul Goodman explaining money laundering to Jesse, because you're like, this is crazy. All right, so let's talk about the fact. So here's another misconception I've seen. Etsy in many states here in the United States will collect and remit sales tax for sellers, but I think some sellers are mistaking that with income tax. So I'm seeing some posts on Reddit where they're like, I thought Etsy already withheld tax, but they don't understand that that's just one type of tax. So these people clearly have not been planning for the income tax thing, but sales tax and income tax are two very different things.
Yeah, yeah, that does sometimes happen. I mean, sales tax, it's like when you go, I mean, not all states have sales tax, but most do. When you go to the store and you purchase groceries, or get gas or whatever, you see that you get sales tax in addition to, just purchasing the goods. So it's the same thing when you sell stuff online. When you make a sale, then sales tax typically has to be collected on that sale and then remitted to the state. And most platforms collect that for us now. They collect it on our behalf. So
Which
we don't
is
really have to
very,
worry about
very
it.
convenient.
Yeah, but it's just sales tax. It's tax imposed on the sale of your goods, but that's not income tax, which is a tax that's calculated based on your profit that you make every year. So that's the tax return that you prepare for the IRS and for your state every year if you live in a state that has income tax. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's just good to be aware that those are totally separate things from sales tax.
All right, so did you hear that, guys? You not only have to pay at least two types of taxes. Okay, I think my camera just went out. Hold on a second.
Lights went
All
out.
right. I know the lights went out. It's not, there's no power outage here. All right, we're gonna put you up, Mark,
Oh,
while I
great.
figure out. I do not know what just happened. All right, hold on a second. I'm gonna
All
unplug
right.
the camera. This is live stuff here. All right, here we go. All right, this is a new web camera. Yeah, I was kind of explaining before in my last live stream that I have a new computer, and the new computer is not the new computer. I don't know what's going on with it, but it's a little. It can be a little bit temperamental, and I'm not sure if it likes me or not. All right, let me. It says click the camera button. Where's the camera
You've
button
got such a
here?
great voice, though. Even though I can't see
All
you, it's
right,
just like
let's.
soothing to
We're
listen to
gonna
your
yeah,
voice.
we're gonna try. All right, hold on a second. All right, I think. Am I back? I don't know. All right, the camera does not seem to be. All right, hold on a second. Yeah, this is not working for me. All right. Well, Mark, let's take this opportunity. Tell us a little bit about you have two courses, right? Let's take a few minutes to talk about the courses you offer.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier just about how with taxes, it's often the very similar questions that I get um, on a day-to-day basis. So I finally put together this course about taxes. It's basically like an introduction for taxes if you have some type of business where you sell stuff online. So it's called Reseller Tax Academy, and it basically just goes through a lot of the things that we've been talking about, just in a little bit more detail, like estimated taxes, income tax, sales tax, self-employment tax, what to do if you get audited, what to do if you haven't been doing anything, how to deal with inventory, just everything that I feel like is good for someone who's starting out or who's even maybe a little more intermediate to know about taxes. And it's not there to help you like prepare your taxes or do your taxes. It's more, how do you optimize your tax situation? In other words, like, what can I do today that's going to put me in a place at the end of the year where I can be in the best spot possible as far as tax savings? So that is just a really good introduction to taxes, and it's going to help you reduce your anxiety. And then just a little bit earlier this year, a few months ago, I finally came out with a bookkeeping course. It's very bookkeeping specific. It's for people who want to learn how to do the kind of bookkeeping that you do in a full double entry bookkeeping system like QuickBooks. So that is, yeah, that's for people who don't necessarily want to be like professional bookkeepers, but they are interested in learning how to do the books or learning a little bit of the accounting that goes behind that. So yeah, and that's called Bookkeeping Basics for Resellers. And I mean, I feel like a lot of the courses I see out there these days are like, $997 once, for 12 months or something. But these are, $250, $350 courses for lifetime access. So anyway, if you're interested, feel free to check them out. And I do think they are helpful.
All right, well, I've got the backup. This is the FaceTime camera. This one kind of sucks, but here we are. Anyways, I don't know what's going on with this web camera, but that is Mark's course. Definitely check it out. And I did join your Facebook group. It is really helpful. And people are super cool about answering questions. So anyone that's a little bit intimidated by bookkeeping or tax stuff for small business, definitely join the Facebook group. The link is down below in the description. And I've personally found these types of groups very helpful, and they're free to join. So you don't really have anything to lose. And Mark is in there, and you have some assistants, right, that are kind of in there too, or moderators.
Yeah, yeah, and some of the people, I mean, you think they're moderators, but they're just really engaged and helpful. And I was going to say the people who are not helpful, I don't hesitate to block them because I do want it to be like a really welcoming, helpful place.
That's true. Sometimes online you can find people that are kind of know-it-alls, but they don't. You can kind of tell they don't really know what they're talking about, and they'll try to give people advice, and it's like not very good. That does seem to be kind of, I don't know. That does seem to be kind of a thing I've noticed. I don't know. So how do you? That's a good question too. Is how do you tell whether someone's actually got legitimate information versus somebody that really is not someone you want to be taking advice from?
Yes, I mean that is the challenge. I mean, if you get multiple responses and they're all different, then you might think, well,
You're like, okay, yeah, that's a good way to know. Because sometimes you're trying to do research online and trying to separate what's fact from fiction, or trying to figure out what's actually legitimate info. Because I think it's great to do online research, but at a certain point, that might not be all you want to do. Like, it's just like, if I don't know if I would rely on just random information I found on Reddit for my tax implications. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, I don't know, because that could get you into some trouble too.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, you definitely want to have a few maybe different sources so you can kind of triangulate that response, or just confirm that it is a good, reasonable answer.
No, that's true. All right, well, let's see if we got some questions. Guys, leave Mark some questions. If you have questions about taxes or bookkeeping, I know lots of you do, so this is your chance. We do have a question right now from Diana, and she asks, good morning. At what point should you consider yourself a business and start an LLC? That's a very common question.
Yeah, so there's a few different reasons that I would consider to make the jump from a sole proprietor to an LLC. I mean, sometimes you might be working with a bank or a wholesaler or a vendor who might only work with you if you are an LLC. So that's kind of an obvious reason, just because it might be a requirement. But typically they don't. And I mean, if you do, it can kind of elevate how your business is perceived. I mean, you might be seen as a little more legitimate. So those are a couple of reasons. But the main reason is that an LLC provides you with limited liability. So if you have some personal assets, whether it's investments or properties or whatever that you want to protect, you can get an LLC. And then if somebody ever does come after your business, they can't also come after you. They're limited to just your business.
And that's why, as you were mentioning earlier, it's really important to separate your finances so nothing is commingled, right?
Exactly. Yeah, because if you're an LLC, but you're still commingling your business and your personal funds, you're not really acting like a business, and somebody could point that out, and you would lose that protection that the LLC is there for. But yeah, the reason that I like for the LLC is that an LLC is like it can be a stepping stone to an S corp, which is a way you can organize your business in order to avoid having to pay self-employment tax. And it doesn't make sense for everybody, but it gives you that option.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit and explore it, because that is something that I'm also seeing a lot of chatter about. So can you explain the S corp election and the benefits it has to you as a small business owner?
Yeah, so we mentioned self-employment tax, basically 15% of your profit in addition to income tax. So when you go from LLC to an S corp, you're basically saying you're submitting documentation to the IRS and you're electing S corp status, which means that they're going to tax you differently, and you're not going to be subject to self-employment tax. So if you are going to be subject to some additional costs, so you have to put yourself on payroll. So you're going to have to pay for a payroll service. You're going to have to prepare a separate tax return. So there are additional costs. So you just want to make sure that your business is generating enough profit or enough. You're going to want to make sure that being an S corp, that the tax savings from being an S corp are enough to offset those additional costs. And I would typically at least start considering switching to an S corp if your profits are exceeding $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And yeah, I mean, you can save up to ten to $15,000 per year going forward just by doing that.
Just by doing the, yeah, that's a really interesting thing you can do. And again, just sort of maximize your tax savings. So one of those 87,000 IRS agents doesn't come for you. All right. Well, Mark, tell us a little bit about what's going on the Not Your Dad's CPA channel. What do you have planned for the next couple months?
I'm trying to create a plan. I do want to be more
Ooh.
consistent. I do want to focus more on kind of the online education, YouTube space. And you know, you actually nudged me a few weeks ago. You're like, hey,
I
what
was
do you
like,
think
dude,
about-"
you got to do a video on this, man. Because I've been watching that guy, Clear Value Tax. Like, I'm sure you've seen. He's an Asian man. I don't even know his name. Like, I just know him as Clear Value Tax guy. And he just, he wears like the same outfit in every video, which is kind of interesting.
Trademark.
And then it looks like his thumbnails are auto-generated. Like, he doesn't do anything. The thumbnails, which I find interesting, they're so low effort. It's like just a screen grab from the video, and there's no text in it. There's no graphics. But I think people started watching his channel during the pandemic because he was talking about the stimulus checks.
Yep.
So I saw his video recently about the IRS changes, and at one point he did say something like, "Don't do anything crazy on your taxes this year." That was his piece of advice. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, that could mean a lot of things. I think be. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know if he was talking about like the write-offs or something. Just don't do anything crazy on your taxes. I don't know. That was kind of funny though.
Yeah.
And I shared this with you recently. There are some really interesting questions on tax subreddits or finance subreddits about asking what people can write off on as a business expense. So that can be, and that, like, some of those questions can be kind of crazy too, where they're like, can I write off? Like, so this one guy, he was, this is a little TMI, but the guy makes money by donating his stool samples to science or something. I'm not kidding. And he was asking if he could write off his food as a business expense. And the general consensus was no, because you have to eat anyways. Only if this organization required you to eat specific food. So people were saying, like, if they said you could only eat, whatever, then you could write it off, but not if you were just eating normally. And I guess that was his question. So that was kind of I've never seen anything like that one before, but yeah, I don't know. Is that the weirdest one you've heard?
That's well, I guess we already went there. So I got a direct message once about so a guy was asking if his girlfriend could deduct the food that she used for her she posts videos online where she eats food.
Oh, like mukbangs or something?
I mean, I don't know. People watch her eat food, in various stages of.
That's like a real thing. Like, so there's two kinds. There's mukbangs. So that's just where people, they're like, I'm going to get all this food from KFC or something, and they just eat it. And the other one is called ASMR. So it's when people, like, they just have like the natural sounds of them eating and they don't talk. So some of them talk and then some of them don't. But it is like I don't know who's watching these channels. It's not me. But I saw one girl one time. She was eating some like ridiculously huge lobster. So again, that probably cost quite a bit of money. It was super gross too, because she had like a vat full of butter. And she didn't, it was honestly kind of wasteful because she didn't eat hardly any of the lobster. So she probably threw most of it out. So that kind of made me feel a little bit disappointed, just because look at all that that could have gone to somebody or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there was another one I saw where somebody was eating an alligator. Like they just had like the whole alligator cooked out. It was super gross. It was ridiculous. And I was like, why? Like just why? I don't know. So that was kind of a fun one. So, but in that case, I imagine you might be able to deduct if it's for the video, right? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it is a gray area. I do remember like
Yeah.
asking other CPAs, and they're like, "Well, it sounds like cost of goods sold to me."
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, because I was talking to another guy who was a CPA, and he said anything that's in a video is considered a prop. So he writes all kinds of stuff off as a YouTuber, and I was
yeah,
like, okay,
yeah. There's a
if
whole
it's a prop.
spectrum of like conservative to aggressive, tax positions. So,
So how, in your opinion, how conservative should you be with your write-offs? Like,
I mean, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to tell someone they can't deduct something that I see a legitimate business purpose for. I mean, one thing that is probably relevant to you and a lot of content creators, a lot of times people get their nails done or buy certain makeup and things like that. So the IRS, so if it's like a clown wig, that you use for like your video and that's it, that's totally deductible because it's got a specific business purpose.
that's true.
If you get your nails done just, to look nice, but then you still, benefit from those,
Yeah, then that might not be, or like I just got my hair done the other day and I don't try to deduct that, to be honest with you. Just because it's like, just because like I'm doing my hair anyways. So to me, that doesn't make sense. But to some people, I guess it might. I don't know. So I don't know. I don't deduct my hair. I do deduct things. I do deduct things like supplies I use in videos, like sewing stuff. But that's because I have a sewing YouTube channel. But yeah, I don't go too crazy with the like personal items, just because I feel like that might. I don't know. I feel like that might be a little bit risky. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I personally don't do that kind of thing, but not saying you can't.
Yeah, that is an area where the IRS is pretty strict.
Yeah,
So.
so you don't. So with the new IRS agents, that might be what the Clear Value Tax guy was talking about with the not getting too crazy, huh?
Yeah, like don't take positions that are too aggressive.
Or like I bought a designer dog, but they'll be in videos or like something
Sure.
like that. So, because that's just your pet, So if you're buying something like, well, they're going to be in the videos, so can I? Oh, I saw another one too. It was a guy. It sounded like he had some sort of farming channel, and he wanted to deduct. He was a farmer by trade, and or something like that, or maybe I don't know if he was. I don't know if that was part of his business, but he wanted to know if he could deduct all of his farming equipment since they were in videos. So that's one where I don't. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously,
that's a
he has a
stretch.
farming business, but not really for the YouTube channel.
Right.
I don't know. Or like if I had a home improvement. If I did home improvement videos, could I deduct all the costs of the supplies to improve my own house? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. Like if you're going to if there's going to be an element of personal use when the video is
Yeah.
done, then
That's true. That is true. Then that might not be one you recommend, huh?
right.
Well, Mark, I appreciate your time. All right, guys, if you're watching, any last questions, feel free to throw them up there. But let's plug Mark's website. This is notyourdadscpa.com, and Mark has a Facebook group you can join for, I guess, a community of people who are very interested in taxes and bookkeeping. You answer questions, and then you also have a couple courses. You've got the Reseller Tax Academy and Bookkeeping Basics for Resellers. And I know you probably get approached quite a bit for services. Do you currently offer bookkeeping or tax services?
Yes, I do a lot of tax preparation for beginners to intermediate online businesses, and I do some bookkeeping as well. So yeah, if you are interested in either of those, feel free to shoot me an email.
Okay, awesome. Is there any sort of specific client you're looking for? Like any sort of parameters?
Yeah, I mean, most of my clients are anywhere between 0 and $1 million. I have a handful of clients who do over $1 million as well, but
Ooh.
I'm typically, kind of in the smaller business, I guess, depending on what your definition is, but that's where the majority of my clients are.
Awesome. All right, well, guys, let's thank Mark for his time today. Thank you so much for joining me. I watch like all your videos, so I'm personally a fan. I know taxes, you might be like, oh, that's boring, but it's actually pretty interesting, and I like the way you frame your videos, and I like that you kind of point out a lot of the nuances and tax implications. So you're not like just all doomsday or not all this is fantastic. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. I like that. I think we need more of that. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any questions, Mark's probably not going to be checking this particular video. If you have questions, you do some live streams sometimes where you answer additional questions, and you also do some videos. So if you have any questions, I would really encourage you to subscribe to Mark at Not Your Dad's CPA and leave a question over on his channel, because he'll probably be much more likely to see it there. If you leave them here, he's probably not going to see them. So thank you guys so much, and I really appreciate everything, Mark. And we need to have you back after tax season, and you can kind of update us on what went down.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate it.
All right, well, guys, this has been a live episode of the Sewing Report. Be sure to give it a thumbs up if you found value from it, and you're welcome to subscribe for sewing and crafts videos here. We also talk a little bit of business sometimes like this, but I'll see you guys again in the next one. And remember, whatever you're doing, make it fun.